Welcome back. I'm going to jump right in with something that's so juicy. With a sample of over 1 million World of Warcraft accounts, 4% own the mighty Caravan Brutosaur from Battle for Azeroth. In just over a month, 5% of that same sample of accounts own the Traders Gilded Brutosaur. To be exact, that is 5% of 1,158,952 accounts. At $90 a pop, that is $104,350,680. That's a lot of dollars. And of course, that's just from this only north of 1 million account sample. There are obviously more WoW accounts. And yeah, there's definitely a bias because of how the APIs work towards like active players, but goddamn, that's a lot of money. And it's also only the beginning of today's fun. You see, Blizzard provides an API for World of Warcraft, and that lets developers query Blizzard servers for data and things like Mythic Plus keystones and achievements. That's why Raider.io works and all of those different websites. And today it lets us have all sorts of fun because we can work out what the hell are people actually doing in World of Warcraft in the War Within? What are they doing? And with raids and with Mythic Plus, are those actually okay? Like, are those bits of the game okay? We're going to check out so much, especially today's sponsor.
You keep me protected online every day. So here's the deal. Data brokers exist, they harvest our data any way they can, they suck, and then they sell that data. That means robocalls, spam, and worse, of course, security vulnerabilities, especially the likes of social engineering. And when big corporate data leaks happen, that data ends up with the brokers. And the good news is that incogni.com/Bellular Warcraft is your superpower here, and it's so goddamn simple. Basically, we've got the legal right to take our data down, but that takes hours and nothing stops that from just being recollected again. So what Incogni does is it scans the brokers, automatically sends those takedown requests, it adds you to suppression lists, and best of all, they constantly rescan to keep your data down. Here's my dashboard. 114 sent, 8 in progress, 106 takedowns completed, and I'm on 21 suppression lists, meaning those brokers will not recollect my info. You can add 3 emails and home addresses as well, and the upshot here is really simple. Your data will not be spread around these brokers without your knowledge or consent. And I mean, literally, I've not got a single robocall since I started with them. Incogni means you can actually benefit from the laws that do exist that are meant to protect us, and you will get 60% off an annual plan at incogni.com/Bellular Warcraft.
Part 1 then, basically what are players doing? So here's data for Azeroth. It's made by Shugen, who's a really cool developer, and it scrapes data using Blizzard's API. And of course, it's a system, right? It's not going to be perfect. Only Blizzard's own internal stats are perfect, and it's not like they just let you query, hello Blizzard, how many subscribers do you have? That would be pretty crazy. What this does have, though, is 1.162 million accounts and 3.352 million characters. There are more methodology details in the pinned comment, and we can do some fun numbers wizardry with all of this. You see, not all of Data for Azeroth's accounts have been active recently, and not all of the ones that have been active since the War Within is released will have actually, owned the War Within. They could be level 3. So, to isolate only the accounts who have played the War Within, we need to find an achievement that every War Within player actually would have completed. And I think it's pretty obviously this one. It's called You're Getting a Delve. It's just to do a delve. You complete that almost instantly. 47% of accounts have completed this one. It's actually the highest completion percentage achievement of all the ones that I could find with the War Within, and it's right in line with other early expansion content like the Rookery, which you do through the quests, and the basic campaign achievements. So using that 47% number, we then find that of our total amount of accounts, 544,707 are actually in the War Within as like active War Within players since the expansion came out. And we can see that, well, here is the delve participation. It stays high until tier 8, which is 60%, and then it plummets. Tier 9 delves, 23%, 15% of accounts have cleared a tier 10 delve, and a mere 6.38 have cleared tier 11 delves. One thing surprised me a little bit, though. Only 36% of people have the Delver's Dirigible, which is kind of insane because you earn that by, doing your first bountiful delve. Are people not doing that? But if you dig deeper, you actually see it's not that completely insane. Some people actually had problems getting that quest to trigger, seemingly because it would only trigger after the beginning part of the endgame campaign. Also in the Delve achievements, Zakvir fell to 26% of the active accounts, and his double question mark hard mode was cleared by only 4%. Let's touch on the raid basics then. 49% cleared all of the bosses on any difficulty, 15% cleared all in heroic, and 17 got ahead of the curve. And that does mean that a few of you were a little naughty and you got a kill of Ansarak heroic, but not every single other boss. But it's okay, I won't tell on you. Hopping over to Mythic Plus then, well, 45% did a Keystone Dungeon, 32% got to 1500 rating, 25% reached KSM, and 11% got Keystone Hero. But you know what's real interesting? World content. I mean, how do you quantify that? How do we work that out? Well, what we can do is look at the Renown stats, I think. So for the Hallowfall Arathi, 26% of you hit Renown 15 and only 6% hit Renown 25. And it's similar with the rest of them with, say, 26 and 5%, 28 and 7%, 26 and 5% for Council, Assembly, and Severed Threads respectively, which is lower than I thought and does explain how only 2.66% of the sampled accounts have Kaz Algar Diplomat. Which did feel super low to me, but honestly I can see why. I mean, unless you have been diligently doing your weeklies and your bountiful delves, yeah, you kind of won't have got that much rep, I guess. I mean, Renown 25 really does represent people just sticking around, continuing to do the world content. And that got me thinking, what about the anniversary patch? I mean, we have this sample of characters who, because of how achievements and time work, we know are War Within people. So how many of them have actually done the anniversary event? That's where it's actually kind of interesting. 29% of sampled people have defeated a Tanaris world boss, 10% completed the entire Blackrock Depths raid in any difficulty, and 18% got 100 tokens, thus opening ungated token earnings. All kind of interesting, right? And so far, these are curious to me, but do you know what they actually open up that's far more important? We can track, with this cohort of players, expansion-wide retention of all the accounts that have done a Tier 1 delve in this sample, right? Or something that any War Within account would have completed. How many, got a given patch 11.2 achievement? That's actually fascinating. But of course, it's not all for today. And for the next bit, gonna hop over to the other set and gonna talk about Mythic Plus. We're gonna talk about Raid.
Okay, take a look at this. At first glance, Mythic Plus definitely does look kind of worrying. I mean, the War Within is lagging behind Dragonflight Season 3 pretty significantly, even though this is the first season of a new expansion, and that does worry me. Now, that being said, the difficulty level changes that effectively moved the old levels 2 through 10, those would always have dented the numbers a little bit, and delves are absolutely going to be siphoning off players. But this is the launch of an expansion. A lot of new people should be there, so I'm concerned about these numbers. Taking a look, Dragonflight Season 3 opened with 3.2 million runs. That's 800k more than Week 1 of the War Within, and each subsequent week of the War Within has actually lagged behind Season 3 of Dragonflight by 300k to 500k. That's a lot of Mythic Plus keys that just aren't being done. Now, of course, runs is the key word here, right? If you've got the same amount of players, but they're just playing twice as much, there'll be way more runs. And Season 3 of Dragonflight was notably easier than normal. And it's funny because people actually seem to kind of love it. This chart, right? This shows the percentage of keys that people did that were actually successful across all difficulty levels. And it is quite the contrast. Dragonflight Season 3 opened strong at an 85.87% success rate. The War Within's was only 76.97, which is not a massive difference, but it's pretty much 9%, and that's over millions of runs. So that's actually a hell of a lot of gameplay. Gameplay that is on average less successful, and Mythic Plus is pretty damn punishing in terms of how, well, you lose your time because you didn't achieve your goal, but then your key depletes, and a lot of people don't really like that. So here's where things do change a lot, though. The War Within Week 2 and 3 decreased to a mere 72%. Dragonflight Season 3 increased all the way up to a 91.72% success rate by Week 5. Now, as time goes on, there are factors that can make these numbers fluctuate, right? Like maybe more people doing higher keys, which could decrease the success rate. But I think the core point is clear. Even at its peak success of 84.02% in Week 8, the War Within success rate does not actually exceed the lowest value seen in either Season 3 or Season 4 of Dragonflight. And to many of us, that's going to be completely obvious. It feels like Mythic Plus is way harder in the War Within, and the numbers, well, they do actually back that up. Now, of course, people do often like hard punishing games. Those are played all the time, but when we see low numbers like this at the launch of an expansion, it shows that perhaps it's not just the difficulty. It's the overall formula that doesn't seem to be working for players right now. But okay, this is overall numbers. Let's try to zoom in
to the per dungeon level. Looking at this, we see the number of runs and the in-time ratio and a very, very clear pattern. The shorter dungeons with higher completion rates are the ones that players choose to run more than the slower ones with lower completion rates. Indeed, the top 3 dungeons are those with only 3 bosses, and yeah, they're also generally far easier. Then on the flip side, take a look at these success rates for Borealis, Grimbatal, and Necrotic Wake. Those are the hardest dungeons. They've got tough bosses, tough mechanics, and mechanics that lean very heavily on group utility, so it generically punishes people who aren't planning, and if you're doing a whole bunch of pug runs, well, maybe you won't be planning as much. Now, if there is a silver lining in this data, it is probably that the difference in time ratio between War Within Season 1 dungeons is lower than in past seasons. So past seasons were easier, but they did have less even difficulty. It does seem then that the War Within is harder overall, but it is more consistent in its level of challenge. None of this comes as a surprise to me, and it probably isn't a surprise to you, even if you're looking at, say, the very top players in the game who often are streaming, who've got YouTube channels. They are not feeling great about Mythic Plus. So the highest end players don't appear to be that happy, and certainly looking at mid-level players and newer players, well, they really seem to be bouncing off Mythic Plus in this season. Taking a look at the data that we've got access to, Season 3 of Dragonflight was easy. Some may even say it's a touch too easy, but people actually played a lot of it. You could argue that they did that just to get some more gear, but I'd also argue, what is the core of an MMO about? Well, in so many cases, it's about doing dungeons with your friends and having a good time. I believe that fundamentally Dragonflight Season 3 did that more effectively. Now, I will be doing a deep dive into Mythic Plus soon, and my co-author on this video and the Mythic Plus one is in fact a regular top 3 worldwide Mythic Plus rating paladin. He's often actually rank 1, so we've got a lot to say. That's coming soon, but next let's have a chat about Raid. All of this data is tracking guild kills via Raider.io. Now that data comes directly from Blizzard's API, which is good. It means we can actually trust this data that it's real. Now the strength is that this is tracking guild kills, right? Now guilds are often the bedrock of a game like World of Warcraft. If the guilds go away, you're only going to have fair weather short-term fans and your audience is just going to evaporate. Another massive plus of using guild kills is that they're less sensational and a better measure of the underlying health. And in our data, we're looking at first boss kills because those represent a guild participating in a raid. And then we're looking at last boss kills, which of course represent a guild completing the raid. Those are both key indicators of health, and they're ones that we saw change radically through the Dragonflight expansion. Vault of the Incarnate's participation was very high, but completion rates were quite low by the end of the season because Razageth was a properly tough fight. And I'd certainly say a marvelously designed one. Now, Sarkareth and Farak, normal and heroic, were both far easier end bosses, and that is reflected in this data. The completion rate, which is basically just what are the percentage of the people who did a first boss kill who ended up getting a last boss kill. We can see Vault's 82, 62, and 20% rates on normal, heroic, and mythic, and how those are dwarfed by Aberys's 92, 77, and 29% rates, and Emirdrasil, which was again higher on normal and heroic, but substantially lower on Mythic. That's because Mythic Farak and the bosses that led up to him were pretty damn spicy. Okay, let's bring in Narubar Palace. Now bear in mind, we've only got up to week 10 data, the season isn't done yet, and what we see is 95% completion on normal mode, 57% on heroic, and 3% on mythic. Now looking at normal, we see that's right on target with the overall numbers from Aberys and Emirdrasil. Taking a look at heroic then, that does seem to be trending a little bit lower. So here are the week 10 heroic clear rates for Dragonflight. Those are 39%, 70%, and 70%. Narubar is at 57%, and that means that Queen Ansarek is basically easier than Razageth. More people are clearing her, but she is substantially harder than Sarkareth and Farak. And of course, just thinking about how things have changed over the last number of weeks, the increase in rate for Ansarek is almost certainly because of the very heavy nerfs that were applied on normal and heroic difficulty. Okay, those are our completion rates, but we can also take a look at just the raw numbers. Again, first boss kills give us a measure of guild participation, and for Vault of the Incarnates,
they're really high. So even though Dragonflight didn't set the world on fire, a lot of people did show up and they did try the raid. Now, those then decrease, but they do stay level through Aberrus and Emirdrasil, and that's actually a fairly good thing. It shows that World of Warcraft was retaining players through an expansion, rather than just having a massive spike and then a massive fall-off, like in Shadowlands. But of course, what it's not is some massive return to form, and that's why we've got to look at the broader context here to actually make sense of this stuff. So these are stable numbers. There are healthy parts, but I have to be honest with you, I was surprised and they absolutely underperformed my expectations. And here's the reason why. This dataset charts the first and last boss kills for every raid since the Nighthold. Now, you can see the COVID bump of Castle Nathria. I think because we really were very critical of Shadowlands, we didn't appreciate how the fact that people were in a lockdown and just wanted to play an MMO meant that it had absolutely insane numbers. We didn't appreciate it at the time, but it really is a massive spike in the data. So Castle Nathria is humongous. And then there's a massive drop as the essential underlying quality of that expansion then kicked in and players left. As it stands, we see the Neru bar is matching and probably trending to slightly edge out Vault of the Incarnates. That is a positive thing, and Dragonflight's guild retention numbers are actually really strong. If you look at Battle for Azeroth and Shadowlands, you do see lots of people turning up for Raid 1 and then big steep drops. So, while Dragonflight and the War Within did not spike as hard, it actually appears that players are sticking around more. And looking back to the chart, Legion is obviously our dream scenario here, where we just have sustained high performance across 3 entire raid tiers. That's absolutely amazing. Legion was a pretty damn amazing expansion, and those raids were just incredible. If you haven't done them, go back to them today just to see the spectacle. So, that was really good. We saw sustained performance. The next expansions did not have sustained performance, and while Dragonflight's numbers were absolutely lower, they were sustained. And that's what matters to me. Long-term success is not built upon flash-in-the-pan success. It is built upon foundations of rock, not sand. And when I see the retention rates in Raid, well, while I'm absolutely worried about the state of Mythic Plus, I feel fundamentally better about raiding and the War Within. And so the great challenge of this expansion is not just to keep players, it is to do what others have not. To actually grow through its life, not relying on day one box sales.
So that's raids then, pretty decent, but man, Mythic Plus is, well, as we'd say here, no two ways about it, definitely looking a little bit rough right now. However, there's plenty of people who do seem to be playing Delves, and I guess that's going to be our big question. Will the Delvers make up for Mythic Plus losses? Are Delves retaining players that would otherwise leave within a month? Do they represent players who just wouldn't be in Mythic Plus anyway? We don't really know, but what matters here is we have a method that we can benchmark patches with. And now that we see what the launch performance of this game is, well, we can take a look at all the future patches and we can see if they move the needle in the right direction. Does this mesh with your experience? What's your experience been like versus Dragonflight? Let me know. And I'll tell you what, at least for a few of our raiders, it could be that the swirly changes that are coming in patch 11.1 might increase that retention slightly. You can learn more about it in the next video.